The Moderna and the Pfizer vaccination is a new type of vaccination in the sense that, again, let me step back and clarify. People say, oh, is it new? We don't know what's going on. No, the technology for this vaccination has been around for over a decade, right? What's coming to fruition is how they can get the messenger RNA inside your cells to give the instructions so that you can produce the antibodies, right? So what is basically in this vaccination is saline with the messenger RNA that is encased in what is called with nanotechnology, which is basically a liposome. Okay, so even in the healthcare model, in the functional world, in nutrition and supplementation, in our own office, right, we have a lot of nutritional products that are in a nanotechnology delivery system, or what we call liposomal delivery. So we have glutathione, which is the body's most important antioxidant in a liposomal delivery. What does that actually mean? A liposome is basically a fat. It's a fatty acid that is the same fatty acids that makes up the membrane of your cells. And so they take this fatty acid and they encase the glutathione with the fatty acid. So you're taking it sublingually under the tongue. It goes right into circulation, is moved through circulation, and then the fatty acids, it can bind right into the fatty acids of your cell because it's basically the same fat, and it's able to deliver the glutathione directly inside your cell where it is needed inside your cell. Now, glutathione is really important. So before this technology, the only way you can get glutathione was through an IV or through nebulizers, right? So when in the supplement industry, they learned quickly that if they put it into a capsule form, it was virtually just not absorbable in a capsule form, right? Then they followed a few more years and they started getting into creams, and you rub the creams of glutathione on. But still, you couldn't get the dosaging through that delivery system in an adequate level that had any real any impact, right? So it's about 10 years ago that this new technology called the nanotechnology is on the scenes, right? And it's in the healthcare industry. And so now you have this liposomal delivery. So when you take a liposomal delivery under the tongue, I mean, virtually you're getting basically the same concentration as if you were doing it through an IV drip. That's pretty incredible. That's pretty powerful, right? And so they're taking this technology now even into this vaccination, right? So what it is that they are using this technology. So the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine is a world apart from the old familiar vaccines that we were talking about, right? Now that even going further, as far as vaccinations, again, being toxic and stuff. Again, as I said, I have not advocated taking vaccinations. I do not get a flu shot on a yearly basis. I do not get a shingle shot, right? I don't take antibiotics, right? I don't do any of these things, right? But there's a lot of other things that are at stake here, right? Um, what we're really knowing now as we get further into genetic testing, not genetic testing for disease, but we call epigenetic testing, which has really only been around since 2003, because from 1990 to 2003 was what was called the Human Genome Project. If I can get into this a little bit, yeah, it was the Human Genome Project. It was a 13-year study globally, and the idea was to map out the human genes. And the idea was to map out the human genes so that we can figure out what genes were causing what disease, and we can go in there and then slice that gene out and splice in a new gene, and we would cure disease. It was a novel idea. What they really began to realize at the end of the 13-year study, that basically everything that we would thought and believed and were teaching in medical schools is really wrong, right? So they knew going into this project that a human being is made up of over 100,000 proteins. Therefore, there has to be at least 100,000 genes to program the production of these proteins. We just got to map them out. At the end of the 13 years, they said we can only discover, I think, don't quote me, like 26,000 genes. There's a lot of scratching heads. Like, how could this be? We don't really carry any more genes than a mouse, believe it or not. We only have about 10,000 more genes than a banana, right? But the truth is, it's like the question is, how is it as human beings we can be so much more complex than mice if we're carrying virtually the same number of genes? And so it spun everything upside down, because it used to be thought that your genes were fixed. It was your destiny, right? If there's cancer in your family, you were going to get cancer. If there's cardiovascular disease in your family, you're going to get cancer. If there's depression in your family, your destiny is to get depression. Tough luck. We now know that only about 5 to maybe 10% of your genes are fixed, meaning I cannot wake up tomorrow and be a different color or a different height. Those replications, those proteins are going to be the same. They're programmed. But about 90 to 95% of my genes are influenced by my environment. and that's known as epigenetics. And what we express, we call it phenotypic expressions, right? What do we manifest in our health or disease models, in our weight, right? In our overall conditioning? Do we manifest, for example, do our genes promote more testosterone dominance, and so our body phenotypically looks more muscular, or do we genetically predominate with more estrogen dominance, and therefore our body phenotypically looks more estrogen, we carry more weight, more fat in certain areas. These are what you call your phenotypic expressions, which are influenced by your genes, which are influenced by your environment. Now, this is pretty cool, right? Right? Because we're not really finding specific genes. I mean, there are genes, for example, for let's say Alzheimer's, but just because a person has the APOE4 gene doesn't mean they're going to get Alzheimer's, right? What we have to look at, science is now looking at all the other factors, right? These lifestyle and factors and stuff. So let's go back to, again, bringing it full circle back to the vaccination. And I get the concern that vaccinations can be toxic, but there is a lot of toxins in the world, right? We're exposed to toxins day in and day out. It's not a question whether you're toxic, the whole world is toxic. It's how toxic are you? So yeah, we don't want to be just running down every single year getting a flu shot or shingle shots, in this manner, right? But we're talking about a different technology here in the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccination. So again, it begs the question, and my job here as a healthcare provider is to bring forward information. I'm not telling anyone listening what to do. I'm just trying to provide clarity and information to the questions. Ultimately, each individual person has to make up their own mind. However, right, there's a lot of information out there, right? And you always got to say, where are you getting the information from? And who are you listening to? Or what social media channels are we listening to that keeps reporting certain things over and over and over again? I'm on these things. I see it, right? So what I do every morning, right, is I spend 2 hours every morning studying. Okay, I study immunology, I study neurology, and I'm staying abreast of all the research and technology that's coming along. And I belong to programs, and I'm getting my resources from scientific journals, okay, into having these discussions with other peers that are pretty well astute in the world of immunology, right? And so, I'm not going to give the person's name. I'm not going to give the name of the company, right? But I can tell you a very preeminent immunologist that is very well respected, okay, especially in the world of functional medicine, because one of the labs that this gentleman is involved with is one of the labs that the majority of anybody who's doing functional medicine is going to use, okay, especially if they're doing anything immune-based, okay? And this gentleman, a year ago, became infected with COVID. This immunologist, this pristine immunologist became infected with COVID and wound up in the hospital, okay, and was going to get put on a ventilator. His life was at stake. And thankfully, he pulled out, right? He pulled out, right? And now he's back working with a company that I use myself when we are running tests for myself, which I do, and for patients. No, so nobody. So this is a virus that, it's like, especially now with the new Delta variant. I mean, this new variant is more aggressive than the original virus. It's spreading more aggressively. That's why here in the East Coast, in the tri-state area, there are more cases up and on the rise, right? And now we're back facing mandates of maybe going back to masks and kids being forced to wear masks. And I just saw on the news this morning, now they're really considering canceling all high school sports this coming fall. This is the world that we're living in, right? Because this Delta variant is spreading rapidly, and it's spreading predominantly to people that are unvaccinated. That's what's happening, right? So again, it comes back down to the discussion of risk versus reward, right? I chose to get it myself because I really evaluated the risk versus the reward. Is there a risk in getting the vaccination? Of course, there's a risk in getting the vaccination. There's a risk doing anything. I don't mean to be facetious. Get in my car, get down to the grocery store. There's a risk that I'm going to have an accident, right? I mean, I get it. There's a risk, but we kind of play by some rules here, right? Because we have yellow lines in the roads, and I can stand on one side, another car can stand on another side, and I obey the stop signs, and I obey the lights, and I stop, let other cars go, and we can all kind of get along, and that ensures me that I have a better risk of getting to the food store more successfully. If we didn't have that, it would be complete chaos, and the risk of having an accident would greatly rise, right? So we have to kind of look at the whole picture here. But from a personal standpoint, right, is people keep talking about what is the risk, the risk of the getting the vaccination. But we've stopped talking about the risk if you actually get the infection, if you get the virus. And tell me that you're going to be exposed to it. That you just it's everywhere. You're going to be exposed to it. They're going to be exposed to it. So now the risk is what happens if you get the virus, right? And we know for a lot of people, it's not a good outcome, right? And as I've been saying to you in past Facebooks, right, is we're having something now which is called long haul syndromes. So we're having many people, I see it every day, who've been infected, right? And the severity of the symptoms doesn't even correlate to the degree of the long haul. So what's happening to these people is months after they have recovered from the actual COVID infection, is now they're having a lot of ongoing unwanted symptoms, from chronic coughs, to being chronically fatigued, to migraine type headaches, to just to chronic digestive problems. I mean, just really affecting the quality of their lives post COVID infection. Right. So we have to kind of weigh these things out. As I said to you, I think in the last week's seminar, right, is we live with viruses in us. We have viruses in us. We have types of viruses that we call latent viruses or dormant viruses. So herpes is an example, right? When people get under a lot of stress and the immune system kind of gets weakened, fatigues, that virus can rear its head. And you stop breaking out in fever sores and other things. Those are herpes simplexes, right? But another form of that is Epstein-Barr virus. So we know that about maybe 90% of the population has Epstein-Barr virus in them. But when your immune system is doing a good job navigating and controlling things, it keeps it in a dormant state and we're fine. But what we're finding is that when people are becoming infected with COVID, right, is that the immune system, in its struggle to manage the COVID virus, okay, is losing control elsewhere, and it's allowing the Epstein-Barr virus now to wake up. And we're kind of becoming now infected or reinfected with the Epstein-Barr virus, right, which has been associated with mono, right? So we get mono-like symptoms. So risk versus reward. You got to take into consideration a lot of things like age, right? What's the age? You can't, people making decisions who are, 15 years old compared to somebody who's making a decision when they're 65 years old.